Chapter 231. Nick just kept thinking about telling Arya about his power. I just have to tell them. Nick repeated inside his mind. Just tell them. If you tell them, everything you have done will be repaid. Just tell her. Nick started to grit his teeth, and Arya kept looking at him with a contrasting mixture of understanding and disgust. On the one hand, she could understand that Nick was completely beside himself since a Fallen had said that Nick was its target. But on the other hand, Nick had been working with Spectres for years, and he was even a chief Zephix extractor. Someone in such a position should be able to distinguish between rational and irrational fear. Obviously, Envy wasn't targeting Nick after all. He was only a John. Arya expected that someone like a chief Zephix extractor would be able to keep their cool in this situation. For several minutes, none of them said anything. Just do it, Nick thought with gritted teeth. Do it. Tell them. Stop being such a pussy. Stop being so selfish. Ding. Then, the door opened and Nick looked over. There were two people entering the containment unit. One of them was the governor. The other one was a man who looked to be in his 30s. The man had bright red hair, which resembled a burning flame. He wore a white uniform that looked very different from the uniforms of the Zephix extractors. There was an emblem on his uniform, which depicted a shield with 7 stars inside of it. Nick could tell who that was, and he took a deep breath. The man with red hair walked forward and looked at Nick with a serious expression. You saw the relay? He asked. Relay? Nick asked. The stone circle? The governor elaborated. Yes, I saw that. Nick said. The man nodded. My name is Simon Francium. I'm a protector from Aegis, he said. Just as expected, Nick thought. Tell me what happened after you came into contact with the relay. The man ordered. Nick nodded and complied. As Nick narrated his encounter with Envy once again, Simon just kept looking at him. Nick told him everything except for the thing about the Eternal. Everything became quiet after Nick was done narrating his story. Simon just kept rubbing his chin in thought as he looked downward with furrowed brows. All right, you may leave, Simon said. Nick's eyebrows rose in surprise. He could leave? Just like that? I hope I don't need to mention that all of this has to be kept a secret, Simon said. No, sir, Nick answered. Good. Then go, Simon said, gesturing to the door. Nick just looked at the table in shock. Right? I'm just a John. These things are far beyond my level. There is no reason for them to talk to me or include me in the investigation. I'm just someone that reported a crime. That doesn't mean that I will immediately join the investigators. If you're worried about Envy's words, don't be, Simon said after noticing that Nick hadn't left. Envy lies all the time just to cause confusion and panic. While Envy is definitely angry that you uncovered his little undercover operation, I doubt that he will actually come here. Right now, Envy is stuck in a secret place with several protectors besieging it. Trying to escape right now would be dumb and dangerous. He might have even told you that he would destroy this city just to lure one of us away from a different battlefield. At this moment, Envy is practically contained. While he is not contained within an actual containment unit, and while we can't work with him, he can't leave his current location. As long as nothing significant happens that frees Envy, there is no chance that he will appear here, and even if he somehow manages to attain freedom, he won't come here. He already told you that he would come here, which means that Aegis keeps an eye on this city. Chances are that, if he comes here, he will just get surrounded again, and this time he might even truly get suppressed. There's no reason for you to worry, Simon said calmly. Nick took a deep breath. While some parts of Simon's speech calmed him, other parts only made him more nervous. Envy actually truly had a reason to appear here. Once more, Nick's heart rate spiked. Seconds passed. I said you can leave, Simon said with some annoyance. Nick gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He said that you should leave, the governor said as he walked around the table to grab Nick by the arm. The governor pulled lightly, but Nick refused to move, which made the governor furrow his brows. Was Nick truly only scared? He had shown a lot of fear until now, but it was starting to get ridiculous. Nick, the governor said with a low voice, is there something that you are afraid of telling us? He asked. The other two looked at Nick with furrowed brows. Was there more? If so, didn't he know that keeping things secret in this situation could endanger everyone? Nick's body was shaking. It was like he was standing in front of an abyss. He had to jump. He had to jump. He had to jump. If he didn't jump, the protector would leave and all of Crimson Fungus City would get destroyed as soon as Envy managed to escape. Even worse, what if Envy somehow managed to tell one of the other Fallen or even its superior about Nick's ability? Sure, Envy was occupied, but another Fallen might decide to capture Nick and absorb his power. The next moment, Nick grabbed 2 fistfuls of his hair while his arms shook, his eyes exposing an internal conflict of monumental proportions. By now, the present people could see that something was going on. Leave the room. The governor and Arya looked at Simon with surprise. This time, Simon had addressed them instead of Nick and cut the power to the containment unit. Simon added, "I don't want any of this to get recorded." Arya and the governor looked at each other with uncertainty, but Simon just threw a serious glance at them. Of course, the governor said. He and Arya threw a glance at Nick before they left. Some moments later, the sounds coming from within the containment unit's walls fell silent, and Simon sat down in a chair in front of Nick. "Tell me what you're so desperate to say." Chapter 232. Nick felt like the room became far darker. There was no way out anymore, yet, for some reason, Nick also felt calmer. His inner conflict had vanished. Right now, Nick only felt acceptance. He had jumped into the abyss, and now he was falling. Waiting for the bottom, there was no way back. Maybe it's better this way, Nick thought as he looked at the wall with melancholy. He felt like he was saying goodbye to his life. He was saying goodbye to all his things and experiences. Then he took a deep breath. "Envy didn't lie," Nick said. "What makes you so certain?" Simon asked calmly. "He said one more sentence to me, one that I haven't told you about," Nick said. Simon calmly looked at Nick. "What makes you think that the sentence wasn't also a lie?" he asked. "Because he spoke the truth," Nick said calmly. Then Nick looked at Simon. "He said that I have the power of an eternal." Simon furrowed his brows. "And which eternal would that be?" he asked. "The null," Nick said. At this moment, Nick felt like he had been freed. He had done it. He had done the right thing. The appearance of Crimson Fungus City shot through Nick's mind. The picture was filled with contrast. There was so much suffering, but Nick also had many people that he called friends. Almost all of them were in dark dream. "You have the power of the null?" Simon asked with a raised eyebrow. Nick nodded. "Show me," Simon said calmly. "I can't," Nick said. Simon raised an eyebrow, showing his skepticism. Nick sighed. "My physical power increases by a factor of 5. But only as long as no human or specter can perceive me." A light appeared in Simon's eyes. "When did you get that power?" he asked. "I woke up in the dregs without any memories when I was 10, Nick said. "I don't have any family and I don't remember anything from before I was 10. One of the experts in the city suspected that my family and I have met the null. The null killed my family. This experience was probably so bad that my brain shut down and deleted all the memories from that day. And since all my memories of the null are gone, I don't know anything about it, which means that the null doesn't need to kill me," Nick explained. Simon looked at Nick for a while. It seemed like Simon was evaluating something. "I believe you," Simon said calmly. Nick was surprised that Simon believed him this easily. Surprised? Simon asked. Nick nodded. "It's because you're not the first one." "Ha!" Nick uttered in confusion. "There was someone with the null's power before you," Simon said. "You're not the first person that has received the null's power." Nick just looked at Simon with shock. "There was one other person," Simon said. "She was an orphan in a different city and she went through something very similar." "Was?" Nick asked. Simon nodded. "She became a Zephix extractor and died while hunting a specter. I think she was either a John or a veteran, one of the two. We only learned about her power after she died. For obvious reasons, her manufacturer kept her powers secret while she was alive. But when she died, they used the knowledge of her power and her corpse as a way to make some money, which was how we found out about her." Nick looked at Simon with interest. He had never expected that there had been someone else who had received the null's power. "How did she evolve her power?" Nick asked in interest. Simon scratched the side of his head. "Now that I think about it, she was a veteran based on how her power evolved," he said. "According to the manufacturer's information, she could imitate the colors of her surroundings. If she remained stationary, it would be extremely difficult to see her. Additionally, her attacks created sparks whenever they hit an enemy. The sparks increased the damage of her attacks and also confused the enemy. As far as I remember, she used sniper rifles." Nick furrowed his brows. "That's strange," he said. "Using a sniper rifle shouldn't take advantage of her power since our ability only increases our physical strength." "It doesn't?" Simon asked with furrowed brows. Nick shook his head. "It's only our physical strength, not our Zephix." A moment later, Nick pulled out one of the spears on his back. "That's why I use throwing spears." Simon looked with interest at Nick. "How did you evolve your power?" he asked. The next moment, Nick turned translucent as he became fog. Simon furrowed his brows while looking at Nick. "Your current evolution is not the most useful," he said. Nick turned back. But Simon added, it has a great potential for evolution and your two abilities have a high level of compatibility. While the current effect of your ability isn't the best, it acts as a foundation for your future. Nick became quite interested in what Simon was saying. After all, this was a protector who was telling Nick about how he should increase his power, but then Nick remembered something. He most likely wouldn't survive the day. In the end, Nick only took a shaky breath. Simon could see Nick's reaction and a small glimmer appeared in his eyes. You assume we will kill you, he commented. Nick took another deep breath and nodded. Why? Simon asked. I've seen how powerful people view the world, Nick said calmly. Rich people only want more money from the poor people. Powerful people want to consume the power of the weak people. Envy is interested in my power. If I die, envy won't attack the city. With my death, thousands of lives will be saved. No one would exchange a city full of people for a single level 2 extractor, Nick said. Simon looked into Nick's eyes. He saw hopelessness and acceptance in them. Simon closed his eyes. You're right, he said as he stood up. Nick's heart rate increased. Killing you might save the entire city. You're right when you said that, Simon said. However, you were wrong with one thing. Nick looked at Simon with confusion and a bit of hope. We're not going to kill you, he said. Nick took a deep breath. You're going to kill yourself. Chapter 233. Nick looked with terror at Simon. That is, when you fail, Simon added. Nick felt like his emotions were going crazy. What do you mean? Nick asked nervously. Your perception of the world and powerful people is correct, Simon said. I would exchange a John for a city. I would be willing to kill you for the good of Crimson Fungus City. Your death would stop envy from trying to get here. Right now, getting your power is probably one of envy's highest priorities. Simon sat back down. Envy's ability is the absorption of human abilities, Simon explained. Nick blinked a couple of times in confusion. The Zephix synchronizer below your neck can somewhat copy the ability of a Zephix. And envy can absorb the Zephix synchronizer of a human and obtain a blueprint of whichever specter acted as the blueprint for the extractor's ability. Envy has consumed hundreds of different abilities, giving him an incomparably vast arsenal of different powers. However, the powers that envy absorbed can't grow past the base level of the original specter from which the power came. Because of that, most of envy's powers aren't even useful against protectors on their own. He has to use tens of abilities at the same time to endanger a protector. However, he also has 5 abilities from Fallen which already make him extremely dangerous. If envy were to get the power of an Eternal, his power would rival the power of an average adversary without even being one, and even worse, he would be able to more easily become an adversary. Essentially, envy would transform from the servant of a very powerful adversary to a new very powerful adversary. That might actually be the very thing that breaks the balance of the war. If envy manages to consume your power, all of humanity will get endangered. The more Nick heard, the more he felt like he should die. Just by existing, he was endangering all of humanity. Silence. So, I should kill myself? He asked. If you fail, Simon said. I'm not sure what you mean, Nick answered. What's your name? Simon asked. Nick. Nick, you knew very well what it meant to tell me about your ability, Simon said. You knew that your death would be almost certain. What do you think? How many people would have done that? Simon asked. Nick looked at the table with furrowed brows. I don't know, he said. Nearly nobody, Simon said. Nearly everyone would have tried everything in their power to keep their power a secret. They wouldn't care about how many people they endanger. As long as they could live for a bit longer, they would be willing to sacrifice thousands of people. But you were willing to sacrifice yourself for the good of a city. I know how cities are, and I can tell you that Crimson Fungus City is neither one of the best cities nor one of the worst. It's in the middle in terms of quality of life for common people. Someone that grew up in the slums of the city, or the dregs as you call it, will only see the worst parts of the city. And yet, you were still willing to sacrifice yourself, Simon said. The tone of Simon's voice had turned warmer. You are what Aegis strives to be, Simon said with a sigh. Nick just looked with discomfort at Simon. No organization is without internal conflicts. And Aegis is not an exception, Simon said. Many of the protectors are forced to fight for humanity. Without the shields keeping them suppressed, most of the protectors would just stay inside a city and keep being normal extractors. They wouldn't even try to fight against the specters that view humanity as their enemy. They would only care about catching demons and normal fallen to increase their power and the weight of their pockets. Nick, you are what Aegis needs, Simon said. You are what humanity needs. Nick felt nervous and uncomfortable. He couldn't view himself like Simon was viewing him. He had hesitated for so long, and he had done horrible things in his past. He definitely didn't represent what humanity needed because of that. Simon continued talking. I am willing to trust you. Nick just looked at Simon with uncertainty. If you were willing to sacrifice yourself for a city that has not shown its nicest side to you, I know that you will be willing to sacrifice yourself for humanity as a whole, Simon explained. Simon stood up again and walked to Nick. Nick, I will put a considerable amount of Zephix into your mind. If envy ever catches you, he will make sure that you can't speak the sentence. He's used to doing that. However, he won't stop you from thinking. He enjoys humanity's suffering too much to do that. And if you ever find yourself in envy's grasp, Simon slowly said as he put his hand on Nick's shoulder, I know that you will have the conviction and strength to trigger the Zephix. Silence. When you activate the Zephix, your head and torso will explode into a storm of fire, killing you instantly and incinerating your Zephix synchronizer. Your death will be instantaneous, and envy won't be able to absorb your power. Nick looked in shock at Simon. He could continue living? He didn't need to die. You showed me your conviction and selflessness, and I will never betray those, Simon said with conviction. I will never forsake someone like you. If humanity ever wants to escape the grasp of the specters, we need people like you. Nick just looked at Simon. He had never met anyone like this. Almost everyone he had met in the dregs was selfish, and the few people who weren't outright selfish were still morally gray and apathetic in the outer city or inner city. Nick had seen more nice people, but none of them were willing to lower their own standards of living to help the ones weaker than them. Even more, the manufacturers were squeezing every bit of money and health out of people in the dregs. The entire world was filled with selfishness and greed. Nick had even thought that he might be the only one who wanted to help others. And today he had finally met someone like him. Chapter 234. And yet, Nick still felt uncomfortable and uncertain. I don't feel that's accurate, Nick said. I've done things that I am not proud of. Like everyone, Simon said. Everyone has done bad things in their past, but not everyone regrets doing these bad things, and not everyone will stop doing them. I don't know what you have done in the past, but will you do these things again? Simon asked. Nick thought of Horua. No, Nick answered very quickly. Never. And do you want to rectify the things you have done? Simon asked. More than anything, Nick answered. Simon nodded. That's everything you can do and what we can ask for. As long as you try your best to redeem yourself, no one will fault you. You can't ask for more than the best. Yet, Nick still felt uncertain. Simon knew what Nick was thinking about. Simon was very old, and he had seen many people in his lifetime. Are you okay with the Zephix? Simon asked. Nick knew what Simon was referring to and nodded. Of course. He answered. Simon moved his right hand to Nick's head and touched his forehead with his index finger. Nick closed his eyes and felt some kind of warm force entering his mind. All done, Simon said, taking his finger away. Can you feel it? Nick tried to find the foreign Zephix inside his mind. Sure enough, Nick quickly found something at the end of his neck. As soon as Nick sensed it, he felt an incredible feeling of danger and fear. He felt like he would die if he provoked that force, which was actually exactly what would happen. I can feel it, Nick said. Simon nodded. If everything fails and you feel like you are about to endanger humanity, just reach out to it. Your end will be instantaneous and painless. Nick took a deep breath. Having an explosive in one's mind seemed to be a scary thing, but Nick just felt relieved. The explosive signified that Nick could continue living without endangering humanity. But then, Nick remembered something. Wait, yes, I am not endangering humanity anymore, but I am still endangering Crimson Fungus City by staying alive. Nick thought. Almost immediately, the pressure in Nick's chest returned. What are you thinking about? Simon asked after he noticed Nick's change in demeanor. Nick released a sigh. While I am no longer endangering humanity, my existence is still endangering Crimson Fungus City, Nick said. Simon nodded. Yes, you're correct, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make a difference. What do you mean? Nick asked. Envy's target is humanity, and the easiest way to deal with humanity is to destroy our cities. Because of that, envy is basically always targeting a city. That means if you get envy to come here and endanger this city, you are removing the danger from another city. You are not really endangering more or less of humanity. You are simply switching envy's targets. If everyone knew the truth, There would be thousands upon thousands of people in Crimson Fungus City that would hate and despise you, but at the same time, there would be thousands upon thousands of people in a different city that would cry in happiness because of your actions. Nick felt uncomfortable. He understood what Simon meant, but he had no emotional attachment to a city he had never seen, while he had a strong emotional attachment to Crimson Fungus City, but that actually doesn't matter. Nick thought as he looked to the side. In the end, humanity fights against the specters. In the end, the fates of individual cities do not matter. It doesn't matter which city gets destroyed. My feelings are unimportant in this regard. Nick looked at Simon, who looked at Nick with an encouraging expression. His viewpoint is much grander. The leaders of Crimson Fungus City care about the fate of Crimson Fungus City, but the leaders of humanity care about the fate of humanity. In the end, what's more important? Humanity or Crimson Fungus City? There's no difference. Nick took a deep breath. You're right, Nick said, thank you. Simon nodded. No problem. Is there anything else you want to know? It was obvious that Simon's demeanor toward Nick had changed completely after he found out that Nick was willing to sacrifice himself for a city that hadn't treated him very well. What will happen now? Nick asked. Simon sighed. Not much, he said. Aegis is very short-handed and all the protectors are working all the time. If Envy's arrival were certain, there would be no issues with me staying here. But due to Envy's current situation, it isn't, and Aegis can't send a protector because of a maybe. Nick looked with concern at Simon. So, you're leaving? Simon nodded. I am one of the protectors that are watching over Envy. I have to go back and continue watching over Envy. For now, Envy is not a direct danger to Crimson Fungus City. However, his servants are, Simon said. Servants? Nick asked. Simon nodded. Envy has many servants all across the world. The relay you have seen is a device that allows specters to talk with each other over great distances. Envy's servants use these relays to communicate with him and accept orders. By the way, Nick interjected, why would specters want to follow other specters? I thought specters were selfish. They are, Simon said. It's actually very simple. Envy contacts a weaker specter and tells them that they are now his servant. They get no pay, and if they refuse, Envy will either kill them himself or send one of his other servants to kill them. In essence, you have to follow or die. So, as soon as you have been chosen as Envy's servant, you are stuck. Follow his orders or die. Nick furrowed his brows. Now, Riker's and Monica's conduct made sense. Refusing to follow Envy's orders represented certain death, while being captured by a manufacturer only represented metaphorical and potential death. Speaking of, Simon said, I may have a job for you. Ha! Nick asked. Chapter 235. Nick looked with surprise at Simon. He had a job for him? Why? Nick was only an initial John. What could he possibly do that the governor couldn't? Are you interested? Simon asked. Nick looked uncertain. Why? What can I do that the governor can't? It's not about you being able to do something that he can't, Simon said. It's whether or not he will actually do it. Nick raised his eyebrows. I don't trust anyone in this city, Simon said. Humans are selfish creatures, and the stronger they become, the more their selfishness grows and manifests. Aegis doesn't have the resources to send anyone into the city, which means that we can only ask the leaders of the city for help. But in the end, the leaders of a city are only interested in their own prosperity most of the time, Simon said with a sigh. If I ask them to investigate something that might end up reducing the power of the city, I will most likely get no results whatsoever. Nick looked at Simon with uncertainty. So, if I accept this task, I might end up weakening Crimson Fungus City? Nick took a deep breath. Humanity is more important, Nick repeated to himself. What do you want me to do? Nick asked. Simon showed a small smile. This is not something that you have to prioritize immediately. I know that what I am asking for you most likely won't be accomplished within this decade or even the one after that. Nick took another deep breath and continued listening. It's concerning the relay, Simon said. What you have seen is a greater relay, which is different from a normal one. A normal relay can only transmit Envy's voice, while a greater relay can even transmit parts of Envy's power. With a greater relay, Envy's servants can capture extractors and feed Envy new abilities without getting to him. Because of that, greater relays are vastly more dangerous than normal ones, and every appearance of a greater relay is a significant event. However, a greater relay is much more difficult to produce than a normal one, Simon said. A normal relay can be produced by an adolescent or stronger, but a greater relay can only be produced by a very strong elder or stronger, Simon said. An elder? Nick thought. A level 4 specter? But Riker and Monica are only adolescents, Nick said. Simon nodded. And that's the issue. There must be a powerful elder or even a fanatic in this city that has created the greater relay. And yet, it wasn't anywhere near the relay, and the relay was held and used by 2 adolescents, Simon said. Nick looked with concern at Simon. Could it have been smuggled in? He asked. Very unlikely, Simon said. It's not that easy to get a greater relay into a city. It's much easier to create it over a long period of time inside the city. I am quite certain that a strong elder or a fanatic belonging to Envy's forces is inside the city. At that point, Simon narrowed his eyes. And I am also quite certain that it has been captured by a manufacturer. Otherwise, the Spectre would have never handed the greater relay to a weaker one. Most likely, the Spectre realized that it had been found out by a manufacturer and chose to negotiate with the manufacturer. I believe that the Spectre entered a containment unit willingly in exchange for keeping the greater relay safe. Or maybe the Spectre threatened a great number of extractors while the 2 adolescents secretly carried the relay away. But in the end, it doesn't matter. The fact is that the manufacturer had to have known that they were dealing with one of Envy's powerful servants. And they also must have known that they needed to contact Aegis because of that. But they didn't, Simon said with annoyance and disgust. Why? Nick asked. Because they would lose the Spectre, Simon said. There is only one fate for a Spectre that can create a greater relay. Death. In short, the manufacturer didn't want to lose the Spectre. Simon looked at Nick. I need you to find out which manufacturer holds Envy's servant. I can't trust anyone that has the power to suppress an elder, since they are suspects as well. If the leading manufacturer of the city has it, neither the governor nor the most powerful people of the city will produce any results since they won't even investigate. And even if the servant isn't with the leading manufacturer, the manufacturer that has it will just bribe them. Maybe they will also share the Spectre. I can't trust them. Even if they don't have the Spectre, they are still selfish and bribable. That's why I need you, Simon said. Nick took a deep breath. To summarize, Nick said, one of the manufacturers must have one of Envy's servants, and you want me to find out which one, right? Simon nodded. Is there anything you can tell me that might help me in finding out which manufacturer might have it? Nick asked. Only one thing, Simon said. If they have it, they are definitely keeping it secret most likely. Not even the city knows of the Spectre. Its existence must be kept even more confidential than any other Spectre the manufacturer owns. Nick furrowed his brows. This definitely wasn't easy. There were only 5 potential forces that could have captured the Spectre: Kugelblitz, Anatomy Ghostie's lab Gemini, and the city itself. While Solace might have the strength to capture an elder, it most definitely didn't have the power to capture a very strong elder, and based on what Simon said, an elder that could create a greater relay must be very powerful. One of these 5 must have the Spectre. Nick took a deep breath. I don't know how long it will take, but I will do my best, he said. Simon nodded. I know that it will take a long time and that I am asking much of you, but know that I will not overlook your readiness to help humanity. There's not much I can do for you, but that doesn't mean that there is nothing. Chapter 236. Nick looked at Simon with interest. What do you mean? Nick asked. You will see, Simon said with a small chuckle. Then Simon walked over to the entrance of the containment unit and opened it. After opening it, Simon could see Arya and the governor waiting for him. Sir, the governor and Arya said in greeting. Simon nodded with a serious expression. The Level 2 extractor has delivered valuable intel to Aegis. The governor and Arya had expected something like that. After all, Simon and Nick had been inside the containment unit for quite a while. I'm glad to hear that, the governor said with a nod. Aegis has taken an interest in him. And we don't want our people to tragically die in an accident, am I understood? Simon said with narrowed eyes. The faces of the governor and Arya turned white in horror. Oh, of course, the governor said. Arya also nodded several times. Good, Simon said. Also, the extractor has performed a tremendous service for the city and humanity. Aegis will always reward such exemplary people. Who has taken the 2 specters that have been captured? Simon asked. The city, sir, the governor said. What will happen to them? Simon asked. We are not entirely sure, but the one called Riker seems too dangerous to work with, the governor said. From what we can tell, Riker grows more powerful by causing fear in people. The more people fear him, the stronger he becomes. Such a specter is causing too much damage, and we will most likely grind him down into Zephyx. Nick remembered when Albert had talked to the dreamer about exactly that. If a specter was very difficult to work with, a manufacturer could also just grind a big part of their body into Zephix after that. The specter would get a couple of days to recover, and when they were fully healed, they would be ground down again. The specter wouldn't be able to grow in power, and the method also didn't give a lot of Zephix, yet it was better than nothing. What about the other one? Simon asked. According to her, she gains power by consuming wealth. The governor said she will stay with the city and improve the power of our forces. Simon nodded. If it weren't for the level 2 extractor, the city wouldn't have access to these specters. Confiscating them from him would be equivalent to punishing someone who has helped the city. I expect that the wealth specter is handed to the level 2 extractor. Additionally, Aegis wants the extractor to get another specter of equal value to the wealth specter, Simon said when the governor had heard the beginning. He had not shown any reaction, but near the end, his eyes widened a bit. Sir, don't you mean equal to the other specter? The governor asked. No, I mean equal to the wealth specter, Simon said. The 2 specters are already his. If he only received those 2, it wouldn't be a reward. I understand that you have to keep the other specter due to its danger. Because of that, I want the city to give the extractor a specter of equal value to the wealth specter. That will be his reward for helping Aegis and humanity. I am assuming that Crimson Fungus City wants to help Aegis and humanity, right? Simon asked with a solemn expression. The governor took a deep breath. Whenever Nick had seen the governor, he had seemed so powerful and in control, but in front of Simon, the governor appeared quite nervous and scared. Does he know about Envy's powerful servant? Nick thought as he looked at the governor. Of course, sir, the governor said with a nod. The extractor's manufacturer will be rewarded with a specter of equal value to the wealth specter. I said that he gets it. Not his manufacturer, Simon said with annoyance. The capture of the specter must be solely his achievement. Naturally, there was a difference between the city handing a specter to a manufacturer and an extractor handing a specter to a manufacturer. If it were the city, the manufacturer could talk themselves out of properly rewarding the extractor. But this time, there was something that Simon didn't know. The governor and Arya looked at Simon awkwardly. Sir, the governor said. What? Simon asked with annoyance. The extractor is the chief Zephix extractor of the manufacturer. The governor said. Simon's eyes shot open in surprise. Then, he looked at Nick. Nick nodded. Simon blinked a couple of times in surprise before his gaze turned serious again. Well, since Nick was the chief Zephix extractor, it didn't make any difference. He could just reward himself, a chief Zephix extractor. Simon thought in surprise. Simon wasn't sure if he had ever seen a chief Zephix extractor. That was so weak and young, however. That was actually a good thing. Since Nick was in charge of the extractors of his company couldn't be that bad. He wondered what a manufacturer led by someone like Nick would be like. Fine, Simon said then. Simon turned to Nick. You can leave now, he said in a serious voice. Nick quickly stood up and bowed politely. Of course, sir, Nick said before walking past Simon and exiting the containment unit. Nick looked at the governor and Arya. Arya nodded at Nick with praise, and the governor looked with seriousness at Nick. I will contact Dark Dream in the next couple of days regarding the specters, the governor said. Of course, thank you, governor, Nick said politely. The governor nodded and gestured for Nick to leave. Now, we have to talk about some issues, Nick heard Simon say as he was leaving. We have a greater relay but no fitting specter. That was the last sentence that Nick heard before he was out of earshot. Naturally, even though Simon had already given Nick the mission to find the specter, he still acted like he was expecting the governor to find it. As Nick left the building, he took a deep breath. So much had happened today. Chapter 237. Nick quickly found a shweeb that he could rent and left the headquarters of the city guards. A couple minutes later, he left the inner city and walked towards Dark Dream. The things that had happened today reappeared in Nick's head one after the other. It had all started with Nick going into the dark room. Then, he met Envy and was saved by Riker and Monica. After that, he talked with the most powerful people in the city and even with a protector from Aegis. And he even got a mission. But I have no idea how to find Envy's servant, Nick thought with furrowed brows while he was walking towards Dark Dream. Someone in this city must have Envy's servant, but I have no idea who. It could theoretically be any of the 4 biggest Zephix extractors or the city, but there are obviously differences. While Gemini could theoretically suppress and capture a strong elder, I don't think that it would have been easy, and such a great mobilization of forces must have been noticed by other manufacturers. Even more, since Gemini would be working with the Spectre, the number of new experts appearing in their company would drastically increase. which would be too conspicuous. While it isn't impossible that Gemini has the servant, the chances are extremely low. For now, I should ignore Gemini unless they suddenly start gaining new experts rapidly. The chances of the city having Envy's servant is not very high. It's too much of a weak spot. If anyone wanted to get rid of the governor, they would only need to report to Aegis about Envy's servant. For example, Anatomy definitely has some issues with the governor. Additionally, they have many people in the city forces due to their power. It would be much safer for the governor to hand over the servant. That means I can also ignore the city for now, but I should still keep an eye on them. That leaves Kugelblitz, Anatomy, and Ghosty's lab. Nick furrowed his brows. It could be any of those. Really? Obviously, the most suspicious manufacturer is Anatomy. They really didn't want to get investigated, and no one would notice it if 5 of their experts vanished for a bit to capture a specter. Additionally, if they suddenly get more experts, nobody would bat an eye. Nick looked to the side as another thought appeared in his mind. Although I am constantly assuming that Envy's servant is a strong elder when that is actually just the bare minimum. It is very possible that the specter is actually a fanatic. It might even be a demon. Nick thought about how powerful a fanatic would be and compared that power to the manufacturers. Ghosty's lab only has 2 specialists. I wonder, as the oldest extractor in the city, how powerful is Ghosty? Could he suppress a fanatic on his own? Nick kept walking with furrowed brows. Eventually, he only sighed. It's too early. If I could find the perpetrator by conjecture, Simon wouldn't need me. In the end, if I want to investigate, I have to become a veteran first. At that point, I can assign myself to the city's forces and investigate. As a member of the city's forces, it would be my job to find criminals and to protect the city. Nick looked forward and saw the tall building that was Dark Dream. That's something for the future. For now, I have to deal with the things that are in front of me. The 2 new specters I will be getting and the new people I will need for them. I didn't expect that I would gain 2 adolescents at once. With them, Dark Dream now has 5 adolescents. And we only have 3 Johns. Nick released a sigh. Luckily, Jonathan and Kiara will very soon become Johns. Constance, Marvila, and Larry will also become Johns within the next 6 months. Nick furrowed his brows again, but the bleeding lady and the lover will also advance to become adolescents within the year. That leaves the puppy as the only reliable specter for newbies, which means Dark Dream can only train 3 newbies at a time. We need more hatchlings so that we can raise more newbies. Nick rubbed his forehead as one problem after the other appeared in his mind. Being a chief Zephix extractor wasn't easy. Nick entered Dark Dream and directly went to Winter's office. As soon as Nick entered, Winter put everything to the side and looked at him with seriousness. I heard that you used the signal, Winter said. What happened? Nick sat down in front of Winter and sighed a lot. Winter nodded and waited for Nick to tell him what happened, yet there was an issue. Sadly, I am not allowed to tell you the details, Nick said. Winter narrowed his eyes. Why not? He asked. Well, let me phrase it like this. I spoke to a protector today. Winter's eyes shot open in shock. What? He asked. Do you know what a protector is? Yes, Winter, I'm not dumb, Nick said with a bit of annoyance. It was a protector from Aegis, and I talked to him for quite a while because of what I found in Riker's room. The governor, Arya Light, and the protector all told me that I am not allowed to tell anyone about what I have seen today, including you. I'm sorry, Winter, I really want to tell you, but I can't, Nick said with regret. Winter rubbed the bridge of his nose. Give me a couple of minutes, he said. I have to think about this. Sure, Nick said. Then several minutes of silence passed while Nick went to grab a coffee from his office. Okay, Winter said after taking a deep breath. I really want to know, but even my father refused to tell me anything. If even my father doesn't trust me enough to tell me, I can't expect you to tell me. Nick nodded. Sorry, Winter. Please at least tell me that Dark Dream got something out of this, Winter said. Nick smiled. 2 very valuable adolescents. Chapter 238. And that's that, a blonde woman wearing the city's uniform said with a smile. The emblem on her uniform identified her as a veteran working for the city, and right now, she was standing in front of one of Dark Dream's containment units. Thank you. Nick answered with a smile. Dark Dream really lucked out this time, she said. I'm not sure what you paid, but it must have been a lot. I thought the city would keep that one for all eternity. Well, I can only say that we are happy with how things turned out, Nick said with a chuckle. The woman also chuckled a bit. Anyway, have fun. I wish we could have this one. Oh, with I mean Gemini. Thank you, Nick said before leading her out. The veteran left, and Nick went back into the building. The veteran had just delivered the 2 specters that the governor had promised Nick naturally. One of them was Monica, and the other one was one of equivalent value to Monica. Dark Dream now had 5 adolescents and a total of 9 specters. Nick remembered how he and Winter had captured the Dreamer inside the sewers, and how they had kept it inside a containment unit in a warehouse. Now Dark Dream actually had a huge building with 9 specters. Well, time to get to work, Nick thought as he walked to the 3rd floor. Trevor and Jenny were already waiting in front of a containment unit, and Nick nodded at them. "You ready?" he asked. The two of them nodded. "This should be easy, but we still have to be careful," Nick said as he walked into the containment unit. Jenny and Trevor followed after him. The door closed behind them, and the 3 of them were now eye to eye with a young woman with blonde hair. The woman seemed bored and apathetic, but she didn't seem too strange otherwise, just by looking at her. Nobody would believe that she was an early adolescent. A specter. Monica just leaned on one of the walls. Jenny and Trevor waited near the entrance. Jenny had her gun in her hand, and Trevor had already taken out his spear. Monica acted like the two of them didn't exist and just looked at Nick. "Scared?" she asked with a bored but dark tone. "Just careful," Nick said. "We don't know each other yet." Monica just looked at Nick in silence for a while. "What do you want?" she asked. "Isn't it obvious?" Nick asked. "I want to come to an agreement with you." "For?" she asked. "What else?" "Zephix extraction," Nick said. "Why would you need an agreement?" "I can't escape anyway. I don't even want to escape," she said. Trevor and Jenny didn't believe her. Every specter wanted to escape since they couldn't grow as quickly inside a containment unit. However, Nick believed her. He was quite sure that Monica didn't want to escape. Envy wanted to kill her, and the safest place was inside a containment unit right now. After all, Envy would send a specter, and the worst place a specter could be in was a containment unit. "You were with the Riker Strikers for a while," Nick said. "You have seen how the gangs in the dregs operate. It is much easier for both sides when we come to an agreement. If I just force everything on you, you might decide to kill an extractor at some point out of protest, and then we would be forced to do other things. In the end, all of us would lose out. So, why not come to an agreement right now?" Nick asked. Monica's expression didn't change. In fact, her expression hadn't changed ever since she had been captured several days ago. She felt just like the Dreamer, with the only difference being that she could actually talk. If the Dreamer could talk, it would probably talk very similarly to Monica. "Fine," Monica said with a bored tone. "Explain to me what you want." Jenny and Trevor watched with interest. This was the first specter they could actually have a conversation with. Sure, the bleeding lady could also talk, but she wasn't much of a talker. She generally just said that she was going to kill someone. She wasn't much for thoughtful conversations. "As a manufacturer, we are interested in 3 things," Nick said. "First of all, we want Zephix so that we can sell it and earn a lot of money. Second, we want our extractors to become stronger. And third, this might surprise you, but we also want our specters to become stronger." Monica's expression didn't change. "Why?" she asked with boredom. Monica had heard about manufacturers, but she had never talked to any extractor, and she also didn't know how manufacturers operated. She genuinely had no idea why a manufacturer would want to increase the power of a specter. Yet, since she couldn't feel emotions, her question seemed like she just wanted to argue, even though she genuinely just wanted to know why. Luckily, Nick had a lot of experience with specters and knew what Monica meant. "If you are stronger, you produce more Zephix, and the extractors that work with you also benefit more," Nick said. Monica's expression didn't change. "For profit, you are willing to increase the power of your natural predator?" "Yes," Nick said with a smile. Monica looked at Nick for a while. This wasn't actually as bad as she had anticipated. "What do you have in mind?" she asked. "Usually, we confiscate 90 of the Zephix you produce. But I am willing to go down to 80 for you," Nick said. "However, I am only doing this because I am trusting in the fact that you won't kill any of my weaker extractors. If one of my extractors dies, it will be back to 90, and maybe we will even sell you to another manufacturer, and I can guarantee that they are not as nice as us." Monica's expression didn't change. She just looked at Nick for a while. Chapter 239. "Okay," Monica said. As a specter that had lived amongst humans for quite a while, Monica was very good at gauging someone's personality. Knowing how someone thought and acted made it easier to get their valuables, which was what Monica was after. In her mind, Nick was someone who stood by his principles. Someone like him either didn't like lying or was horrible at it. Her instincts told her that Nick was honest. "Well, as honest as humans came." "Good to hear," Nick said. "So, how can we improve?" "Your power," Nick usually needed to try stuff until he found the optimal way to work with a specter, but with Monica, he could just ask. Valuables, Monica said. Anything that humans consider valuable, I can consume to become stronger. Can you give me some examples? Nick asked politely. Credits, gems, weapons, food. If a human can own it and would feel pain from losing it, I can consume it, Monica said evenly. Nick furrowed his brows. What about food waste? He asked. Nick wanted to make sure that there was no overlap with the dung heap. No human would care about food waste since it can't be eaten nor traded, Monica explained. So, no. What about loved ones? Nick asked. No, Monica said. Pets? No. So, only objects? Nick asked. Yes, Monica answered. What about sentimental value? Nick asked. What do you mean? For example, if the mother of a young child dies and the young child only has a drawing of his mother, the little child doesn't want to lose the drawing since this object is the last thing left by its mother. Therefore, this object holds a lot of value to the child but is worthless to others, Nick said. Surprisingly, Monica didn't immediately answer. I don't know, she said. You don't know. Nick repeated in surprise. Trevor and Jenny were just as surprised. I don't know, Monica repeated. Nick furrowed his brows. Can we try? Yes, Monica answered evenly. Nick nodded and turned to Trevor. After giving Trevor some instructions, Trevor left. A couple of minutes later, Trevor came back and gave Nick something, a blanket. Nick took a deep breath when he saw the blanket. This was the blanket that had been on Horua's bed about 2 years ago. Nick had kept it. Try this, Nick said as he put the blanket on the ground. Monica looked at it and extended her arm towards it. The next moment, the blanket slowly turned into dust and flew towards Monica's hand. The dust became smaller and smaller until it vanished when it touched Monica's hand. Monica remained silent. The other three also remained silent. No, Monica said, no difference. So, you are only interested in objects that are valuable for a great number of people, Nick said. Yes, Monica answered. Is there some kind of diminishing return? Nick asked. If there is, I haven't noticed, Monica said evenly. Nick nodded. Then, we're going to test that, Nick said. I'm going to get some money and come back later. Monica didn't say anything and just kept leaning on the wall. Nick left and got about 100,000 credits in cash from the company card. He was willing to use up all of this to properly test Monica's power. Nick went back to Monica and grabbed 10,000 credits. This was the first time Monica had ever seen so many credits at once. Since Monica had been working in the dregs, she was never around a lot of money at most. She got around 2,000 credits per day, but now someone was handing her 10,000 credits. Maybe it actually wasn't so bad to be captured. If she got 10,000 credits every day, she might grow even faster than before she had been captured. Monica absorbed the credits just like she had absorbed the blanket. It only took a couple of seconds. A moment later, the eyes of the three extractors opened wide in surprise. They could actually feel the Zephyx in the air increasing. They hadn't felt that from any of their specters before. Naturally, the Zephyx in the air reduced again since it was absorbed by the containment unit. Nick walked out and checked the Zephyx storage, and when he saw the Zephyx, his eyes widened in shock. 50 grams, he thought. She just turned 10,000 credits into 50,000 credits. Nick's mind was going crazy. There has to be a downside. If not, she could produce more Zephyx than the crimson fungus. Nick took a deep breath and walked back in. He gave her another 10,000 credits and looked at the storage again. Nick's eyes shone. 25 grams, he thought, half as much as the first 10,000. So, if I give her another 10,000 credits, it will reduce to about 12.5 grams. Nick handed Monica another 10,000 credits and checked again. Sure enough, 12.5 grams, he thought as he scratched his chin. For the next couple of minutes, Nick gave Monica less and less money and always checked the amount of Zephyx she produced. After all of his observations, he went to Winter to talk with him. While it was definitely Nick's job to decide how the extractors worked with the specters, he wanted to know what Winter thought about this. Winter was far better at the financial aspect of the company. After talking to Winter, Nick performed more tests on Monica, and eventually they knew what to do. Every day, Monica would receive 33,000 credits from the company card. The 33,000 credits would be converted to about 90 grams of Zephyx, which would amount to 90,000 credits of revenue. This meant that Monica would give the company a profit of about 57,000 credits per day, even more. It was extremely easy to work with Monica, and she didn't even want to escape. On top of that, she could also give an ability. She was the perfect specter. In the end, Nick decided on a fitting but ironic name for her. From now on, Monica's codename would be the Money Sink. Chapter 240. After dealing with the money sink, Nick went to the other specter they had received. It was already evening, but Nick didn't have other things to do. Luckily, the veteran who had delivered the other specter had already explained all the details to Nick. This specter had been suppressed by the city for several years already, and the process of working with it had already been perfected. The city didn't act uncooperatively and directly told Dark Dream how to work with it. Many extractors had already worked with it. The process of working with it wasn't nice, but it produced a ton of Zephyx with no real danger. Nick himself wouldn't be working with the specter regularly, but he still wanted to work with it at least once to know what his employees would go through. Nick entered the second floor of Dark Dream, the floor for possession specters. Then, Nick walked to one of the containment units, but instead of entering directly, Nick typed several things into the containment unit. The city had told Dark Dream that they needed a special containment unit for the specter. The containment unit was a bit more expensive than the normal version, but it made this specific specter essentially harmless. This containment unit had 3 special functions. The first one was that it couldn't be opened from the inside. Not even extractors could open it from the inside. If someone wanted to get out, they would need to destroy the containment unit, or someone from the outside would have to open it. The second function was a timer. When the timer was up, the third function of the containment unit would become active, and the exit would open. The city said that shifts with the specter should be 24 hours long and that nobody should work more than 1 shift every week with the specter, preferably not more than once every 2 weeks. For now, Nick put in a timer of 5 hours. He wasn't really here to work with it, but to see how it would feel to work with it properly. Nick opened the door and entered. Bang! The door behind him closed, and it wouldn't open for 5 hours. Nick inspected the door from the inside. Sure enough, no way to get out, he thought. Then, Nick looked at the center of the containment unit. On the floor was a small object. Nick walked forward and picked it up. It was a pair of glasses. They looked as inconspicuous as one could imagine. This was the specter. Nick looked at them for a while before he put them on. Then he looked around and waited and waited and waited and waited. Not much going on, huh? Nick thought, well, they did say that it takes around an hour for them to really show their effect. For an hour, Nick just waited in boredom. Nick was startled back to consciousness as he heard the speakers in the containment unit speak his name. It was Winter's voice. The dreamer has broken out. Winter shouted. Nick's eyes widened in shock. What? How? He shouted. It gained a mental ability that hypnotized one of our extractors who let him out. We have to catch it. Winter shouted. Nick took a deep breath, took off the glasses, and ran towards the exit. Then he remembered that he couldn't get out on his own. Winter, let me out. Nick shouted. Silence, Winter. Silence. Nick looked at the speakers but saw no speakers. For a moment, Nick was confused. Wait, what? Nick uttered. Then, Nick remembered that this containment unit actually didn't have any speakers and looked at the glasses. They got me, Nick thought with a sigh. The glasses, which were officially called the glasses, distorted someone's reality. They created voices that weren't there. They created smells that weren't there. They could even create visions. Luckily, the glasses mainly created auditory hallucinations. Visual hallucinations were quite rare, and when they appeared, they were rather mild. It was more confusing and perplexing than horrifying. After a bit, Nick chuckled and put the glasses back on. This was how an extractor worked with the glasses. They put them on, went through a couple of hallucinations for 24 hours, and then left. Some minutes later, Nick felt like the room was becoming a bit blurry until, eventually, it became foggy. Nick felt like he was inside the fog's containment unit. For about 2 hours, Nick felt like he was in the fog's containment unit. Then, the fog vanished. After that, Nick felt like Jenny and Trevor were talking to him from just outside his vision. Nick even held a conversation with them. Of course, Nick kept telling himself that the conversation hadn't really happened. Another hour later, Nick's nose scrunched up as the smell of the dung heap appeared in the containment unit. He really wasn't a fan of that one. Eventually, Nick put the glasses to the side. 5 hours were close to being up, and Nick just waited for the last couple of minutes. Nick leaned against the wall for the last few minutes, and then the third unique function of the containment unit appeared. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind pushed Nick to the side, almost making him fall to the ground. When the timer ended, the containment unit created this powerful gust of wind to remove the glasses from the extractor's face, and when the gust of wind appeared, Nick's eyes widened in shock. Just now, he had seen the glasses flying away from his eyes. But how? He had taken them off earlier. He had heard that there had been instances of extractors thinking that they had taken the glasses off when, in reality, they hadn't, but he hadn't expected that the illusions were that convincing. In shock, Nick just looked at the glasses getting flung against the wall of the containment unit with quite a bit of force. Luckily, they were far more durable than normal glasses. Some seconds later, the wind stopped and the exit opened. Nick walked out and closed the containment unit. Then, he looked at the Zephyx he had produced. 12 grams. Nick thought, seems about right. The glasses produced Zephyx based on the amount of time they had been worn and on the power of the person wearing them. The upper limit was a midjon. 24 hours of being worn by a midjon produced about 95 grams of Zephyx. If Nick wore them for 24 hours, they would produce about 60 grams of Zephyx. It's definitely weird working with them, but I think people would rather work with this than with the bleeding lady, the lover, or the dreamer. And it also produces a lot of Zephyx. Sure enough, the glasses are a great specter.